Good evening.
Okay.
We want to welcome everyone who is joining us here this evening, both in person and via Zoom and on our live stream. The purpose of this public comment session is to hear feedback from the public on Policy 1310, parental engagement. On November 2nd, the board announced that the administration would be facilitating this opportunity to receive feedback on this policy. A quick review of the rules. If speaking in an individual capacity, please state your name. If speaking for an organization, please state your name and the name of the organization. Speakers are asked to present their comments in a specified time of 3 minutes. When the yellow light comes on, you have 1 minute left to start winding up your remarks. When the red light comes on, it will beep, which indicates your time is up. Complaints about named staff, students, or parents should not be voiced in open session. Finally, DPS administration and board members will listen carefully and consider the comments, but do not engage in a discussion with speakers. Now we'll turn it over to Ms. Smith to read the people that have signed up. Thank you.
Good evening. Our first speaker is Grant Berry, followed by Ingrid Connolly.
Hello, my name is Grant Berry, and I'm a Durham County resident. I wanted to voice some concerns I have about the proposed policy 1310. Number one, I guess I'm just not close enough. My first concern is regarding SB 49, section 115C-76.75C, that prohibits the participation of a child in these surveys without prior written or electronic consent of the parent or the adult student. Policy 1310 allows collection of a child's personal information without parental consent or notification under opportunities to withhold consent / opt-out notifications on page 8 for marketing purposes. The law does not allow an exception from parental consent for marketing purposes. The next concern is the healthcare consent for treatments by healthcare practitioners. The policy does not mention the requirement that healthcare treatments can be provided only with parental consent. Most schools do not have school-based clinics providing treatment, but Hillside High School has a school-based clinic which could provide treatments requiring parental consent. And my third and final concern is SB 49 requires public schools to make specific rights available to parents, either electronically or on display on their website. That is in reference to section 15C-76.25B. Policy 1310 does not appear to require that notification of rights to parents. I'll read some of these rights as my time permits. The right to consent or withhold consent for participation in reproductive health and safety education programs. The right to seek a medical or religious exemption from immunization requirements. The right to inspect and purchase public school unit textbooks and other supplementary instruction materials. The right to receive student report cards on a regular basis that clearly depict and grade the student's academic performance in each class or course, the student's conduct, and the student's attendance. The right to opt into certain data collection for their child. The right for students to participate in protected student information surveys only with parental consent. The right to review all available records of materials their child has borrowed from a school library. The right to request an evaluation of their child for an academically or intellectually gifted program for identification as a child with a disability. The right to participate in parent-teacher organizations. The right to access information relating to the unit's policies for promotion or retention, including high school graduation requirements. The right to review statewide standardized assessment results as part of the state report card. And lastly, the right to access information related to the state public education system, state standards, report card requirements, attendance requirements, and textbook requirements. Thank you.
Ingrid Connolly is next.
Hello, my name is Ingrid Conley. I am a resident of Durham. I have 3 children in the Durham public school system, actually in a charter school. I'm here to comment on the Board of Education Policy Manual changes or updates. And so the previous speaker did a very good job of indicating the differences between the actual SB 49 versus this document. And I have not had the opportunity to call out those differences as well as he did. But I guess the first point I have is that when you have a document that is as detailed, why is it being rewritten in a different way for this policy manual? Second of all, the bill does indicate that the documents need to be easily understandable for parents and students. This document, in my opinion, is not. I think there's a lot of wording in here which is vague, which I think is then hard to enforce. It's hard for a parent to come to the school if there is vague language because it could be interpreted differently. Just some examples of that are on page 1. Be helpful if I use my glasses. Parental involvement plans. B, responsible parenting. That is about as vague as you could possibly get. There's also another section in here, I noted it, where the wording is just very open to interpretation. Also under opportunities to withhold consent or opt-out notifications, I am concerned about number 4, that's the opportunities D. There are some parental notification and permissions are not required for. Again, items that I think are vague and could be could create a problem in the interpretation. I would just say that as a parent in looking at this document, I really have a lot of reservations just because of the language, because of the vagueness, because of the fact that there are differences. I am really hoping that there is some additional time and effort and perhaps some involvement of parents in the finalization of this document, because I do think that is lacking. But thank you for all the work that you do. I appreciate it. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to express my thoughts.
Our next commenter will be Sky Sanchez, followed by Kate Elander.
Good afternoon. My name is Sky Sanchez. And should I put it on? And yeah, I went to Northern High School. I was a Durham resident. I have a lot of cousins and nieces and nephews who also attend Durham public schools. And yeah, I just wanted to basically just, I guess, voice some of the concerns that I had with the new policy and just see if you guys could also take a look into it. Well, okay, I was looking at SB 49, the original copy, and I noticed that right in the beginning, it has all of the parents' rights, and some of them are like to direct the education and care of his or her child, to direct the upbringing and moral religious training of his or her child, to enroll his or her child in charter schools if they would like, to make healthcare decisions for his or her own child unless otherwise provided by the law. Yeah, and to review medical records. I just think it should be like kind of, I mean, it's basically a policy about parental rights. I think that should be, I don't know, the first thing just to make it obvious. And yeah, so I would also like to talk about page 7, number 4, section D. It talks about parents' permissions, and it lays out some of the things like, you know, you have to give permission for giving out the child's telephone number or their like, sorry, address, name, we have to have permission from the parents to do that. However, there is a section that says that parental permission is not required for short duration academic, career, personal, or social guidance and counseling and crisis intervention that is needed to maintain order, discipline, or a productive learning environment. My concern is for the parents who have children attending Durham Public Schools who are unaware of the academic, career, personal, and social counseling that their child might receive, especially if it's in the form of discipline. I think that parents should definitely know that their child is receiving some form of discipline, even if it is short term and even if it is in the form of counseling. And so I understand that I only have 41 more seconds. But I would also like to talk about sorry, there's like another part. Page 10, I have 20 seconds. Section E, number 4, it's titled Instructions on Gender, Ideology, Sexuality, Sexual Activity. And in this section, it states instructions on gender identity, sexual activity, and gender identity are basically not allowed from K to 4th grade, which I agree with. But I do not like that it has, under the exception that children have student initiated questions, that we might be giving that sort of information out. Thank you guys for listening.
Kate Elander.
Good afternoon, y'all. I'm a DPS grad and a Durham County resident, and I have a first grader in DPS as well. I'm here mainly to provide comment on the section under changes related to discussions related to student well-being. I know that a lot that is here is a part of the requirements from SB 49. And I know that whether or not we agree with that, we have to figure out how to comply, unless we're making the choice as a district to say we're not willing to comply because we think it's discriminatory. But I think I mainly just have questions, I think, related to section 2 of the procedures for parent involvement around student health, related to disclosure about students preferring or using different pronouns or different names in school. It says the school will notify parents when that happens. I'm kind of wondering, I know that's a requirement of SB 49. Can this also include that the student will be included in that, like that the student will understand that before their parents are notified? It doesn't seem right to me that, like, I think it should be codified in the policy that the student knows if they're making that choice at school, that's going to be that their parents will be notified. The other is in section 4, and now my phone is gone. Anyway, related to instruction around sexual activity and gender identity and sexuality in grades K through 4. And I think my questions are just about, like, we acknowledge that there are students in Durham Public Schools, many students who come from families who may have 2 moms or 2 dads or just a mom, and I think, and they're also gender diverse students in kindergarten, right? Like, these students exist. And I think I'm wondering about how we're addressing that with this particular part of the policy. Like, are we not allowed to read a book that has 2 moms in it, or that has a transgender young child in it? Is that considered instruction or a curricular material or a source material? Or are we allowed to acknowledge that these families and these young children exist in our community the same way we're acknowledging that students from families with a mom and a dad, or students who are not gender diverse, exist in our community? And I just think we have to think about that with regard to this policy. Thank you.
Our next two speakers are Jim Walker and Ron Duffy.
Ladies and gentlemen of the school board, esteemed members of our community, thank you very much for the privilege of speaking with you this afternoon. 345 students in Durham Public Schools have a non-majority gender identity. This afternoon, we stand at a critical juncture where a policy rooted in fear threatens to overshadow our most sacred duty to nurture and protect our youth. Your opportunity and our opportunity is to uphold the dignity of every student in Durham seeking education and acceptance. The draft policy before us compels our educators to report changes in name or gender identity, effectively making them agents of scrutiny rather than support. Thus, it is all the more imperative that we must remember that our schools are sanctuaries of learning, not places of surveillance. Think of our middle school students, our high school students. The draft policy sends a message to them. The policy says, you are further alienated. For those who have no safe haven at home, you now have no safe haven with your school counselor or your teachers. Consider the message we send our children when we prioritize compliance over compassion. Do we wish to teach them that conformity is more important than character? The esteemed board in front of me, we have an opportunity to foster our students and an opportunity to resist. This policy, though mandated by the state, clashes with the very essence and purpose of our educators and as guardians of the future. I contend it clashes with the will of the people of Durham County. I therefore urge you to proclaim, it shall be the policy of this board that no student's identity or change in chosen name shall be reported by DPS staff to any private citizen, whether they be parent, guardian, or otherwise, under any circumstances. We must not be complicit in a system that will harm the very souls we are entrusted to elevate. History has its eyes on us, and it will remember the choices we make today. Will we choose compliance with a statute that may or may not be feasible in the end? Or will we choose the unstoppable power of love and acceptance? Our children deserve a world where they are free and safe to be themselves. Let us stand on the right side of history. Let us choose to protect, to embrace, and to ultimately empower all of our students. Thank you.
Mr. Ron Duffy.
Good evening. I am probably, as I look around, probably the oldest person in this room. What does that mean? That means I do have a little bit of knowledge, but I didn't come ill prepared, so I don't have all the background. I have it at home, but I didn't bring it with me because really I don't need to say much. They've eloquently just explained the agenda. Now, if I'm not, and if I think I'm correct, SB 49 passed the legislature. Did it not? Did that pass? It passed, I think. It didn't pass. There are 100 counties in this state. It didn't pass 99 with one exception. All 100 counties are expected to comply. Now, all the options and the legal ramifications, and I'm not at that level, but I do know that whether you like it or not, it passed. And how you want to make Durham County exception. But I grew up in this county. I went away when I was in the military and everything else, but I live in Orange County, just outside of Durham County. But I think we had an event, and count my seconds off. We had an event at our church October the 14th. And the name of the event was Culture Clash. What to do? How do you respond when the current culture clashes with the current things that's going on in this country? I have 7 great grandchildren in this school system. I'm concerned for them very much. And there's no need for me to say all the things other people said. Thank you for your time.
Our next 2 speakers will be Dr. Luca Thornton, followed by Lorena Perez.
Hello, my name is Dr. Luca Thornton. I do concur with Governor Cooper's veto statement regarding Senate Bill 49. And I do have some comments about policy 1310 changes that correspond to the content of Senate Bill 49. I would like to encourage the board to please uphold your values. I was here one of the last rounds of after the bill had received some traction already, and I heard some positive feedback from many of our community members as well as you all. And I really encourage you to stay strong to those values. In addition to those shared by the rest of our community here in Durham, the city, the further county. I'm currently applying to jobs in education, and DPS is basically the last safe bastion for LGBTQ folks like me, our allies, and those who want to help ameliorate the disparities in our state's public education system. I'd like to keep it brief in terms of policy 1310. I particularly disagree with on pages 9 and 10, items 1, the very last paragraph, and item 4, due to the language that holds educators accountable for outing students and breaking that important level of trust between educators and their charges. You know that our town will support you, whether it comes to in spirit, shouting at rallies and such, even financially. I think leaving it in the hands of the educators to make their own personal decisions on how to move forward in light of this legislation is important. And thank you. Oh, also thank you for the inclusive language that you all revised in 1310. I do very much appreciate that.
Hi, my name is Lorena Perez. I am a parent of a kindergartner this year at DPS. And I do also want to talk about the proposed changes to policy 1310. specifically the same sections that Dr. Luca was just referring to. I urge you not to slide backwards. These proposed changes contradict with our own support policy that like you all passed, we fought for. It's a good policy. It has offered my child a space to be poured into with love. That's what elementary school is supposed to be, right? Like figuring out that like, oh my word, numbers and counting and I exist and what does this world entail, right? My child is trans, they exist. So they deserve also to get seen themselves in the books that they're going to read, in the classroom conversations they're going to have. It does not need to be placed on the burden of their teacher to now have to weigh, well, what conversation will this policy and the language that is overarching and way too vague, right? The exclusion of all, what would that look like in a teacher's classroom? Which books will you need to remove? All gender identity really should then remove all human and anthropomorphized figures from all books. But that's not what's going to happen, right? It's only going to be the queer characters that are taken out. It's only going to be the queer families that are taken out. My queer family, my queer child deserves to get seen in the same way that every other child does. This is supposed to be about parents' rights. Well, I am a parent and I deserve this right as well. I know you all care about this and I recognize what does it take to say like, we will not comply in this. My understanding is that you can file a declaratory ruling and slow it down, halt the changes, right? Let's not do their work for them. Let's not just like slide it past. There is precedent, Parker versus Hurley, the US Court of Appeals in the First Circuit. And I recognize we're not in the First Circuit, but there were parents who sued the school district of Lexington, Massachusetts, on the grounds that their children were exposed to ideas that they found repugnant because they were promoting LGBTQ acceptance. And they lost because that is not a burden that the First Circuit found violated those parents or their children's rights to an education. It was not burdensome enough because the fact of the matter is the world exists and school is about teaching us what does exist in the world. My child exists, my family exists. And we deserve the level of care and education that every other child is also going to receive. And so I urge you in the same way that Luca offered, we will have your backs if you will have ours. We will figure out how to make sure that you are cared for in the same way that you are caring for our kids.
Members of the public and those watching the stream, we are scheduled to be here until 6:30 and we will not leave until 6:30. So we encourage anyone who is on their way, take your time. We'll be here until 6:30 and anyone who's considering it, we will be here. And there's also for those who are not able to make it, we do have the policy 1310 at dpsnc.net. And when I have been getting those, I have been replying with received so that you know that those have been received. But with that said, we will be here until 6:30. Thank you.